Hello Year 4, happy Friday, and I hope you're excited for another science lesson on our animals, including humans topic. Before we get into our new learning, let's recap what we've done and what we've done over the last couple of weeks with our quiz. So I'm going to share my screen, and this is what the quiz should look like. If you have the quiz sheet in front of you, then you can just circle the correct answer. If you don't, no problem at all, just write your numbers 1 to 7, and just simply write the answer in. No need to write out the full question. And if I'm going too fast for you at any point, just pause the video and circle the answer or write the answer. Right, number 1. Which teeth are used for chewing and grinding food? Incisors, canines, premolars or molars? Number 2. Where are your incisors located in your mouth? Are they at the front, on the corners, in the middle, or at the back? Question 3, what is the function of canine teeth? Is it to chew, to grind, to cut, or to tear? Number 4, how many teeth do adults have altogether? Do they have 20, 28, 32, or 36? How many canines do adults have? Do they have 4, 6, 8, or 10? And going back to last unit, which was on sound, what vibrates to cause sound? Air particles, waves, decibels, or pitch. And going all the way back, a whole year to when you were doing your topic on light. An object that allows no light to pass through it is known as transparent, translucent, opaque, or reflective. So, pause the video if you haven't had a chance to complete all of those questions, and resume when you're ready. Right, so let's have a look at the answers for our quiz. So make sure you've got a different coloured pen or pencil and are ticking or crossing as we go along. So molars, of course, are the teeth that are used for chewing and grinding food. Incisors are located at the front of your mouth. The main function of canine teeth, of course, is to tear our food. How many teeth do adults have altogether? They have 32. Adults have 4 canine teeth. Air particles vibrate to cause sound. And finally, an object that lets no light pass through it is known as opaque. If it lets all the light pass through it, it's called transparent. And if it lets some light pass through it, it's known as translucent. And reflective, of course, means that light quite literally reflects off that surface and shines it in a different direction. So our what for today, we are learning to compare teeth between carnivores, herbivores, and omnivores. So we are going to be moving away from the human mouth and towards animal mouths. But before we do, on a scrap piece of paper, what I'd like you to do is write down everything that you can remember about this, the human mouth. So out of all the things that we have done in the last 2 weeks looking at humans' teeth, I would just like you to write down on a scrap bit of paper, maybe give yourself 1 minute, to write down everything that you can remember about the human mouth and what we've looked at the last couple of weeks. Any fact at all. So I might put, using the quiz to help me, humans have 4 canines, or adults have 4 canines, might be one fact. You might say what the job of a certain tooth is. How many teeth of a certain type we have. So write down everything you can about this. Pause the video, off you go. So hopefully you've now got a huge abundance of facts that you've remembered about the human mouth, more specifically the teeth. So some facts that you maybe could have come up with is that you have 8 incisors. You could say that adults have up to 4 wisdom teeth, that premolars are used for grinding food, that for incisors are used for cutting food, that children are born with 20 baby teeth, or milk teeth. So these are just some of the facts that you could have come up with, and I'm sure you've got loads of those ones and loads of other ones as well. So, as I said, we're now moving away from the human mouth and towards animal mouths. Now, different animals have very different diets, and we categorize those animals into 3 different types. So let's look at them. Firstly, we have herbivores. So repeat that after me. Herbivores. One more time. Herbivores. Now, a herbivore is any animal that eats plants, that eats only plants, I should say. So they don't eat meat, they only eat plants. And just because they don't eat meat doesn't mean herbivores are small. There are some examples of, if you think of an elephant, for instance, as a herbivore, they grow to be absolutely enormous. So herbivores are the names of any animal that just eat plants and nothing else. Now, the next word, category, carnivores. Repeat it after me. Carnivores. Carnivores. So a carnivore is any animal that eats only meat. So you might recognize the word carne if you think of chili. Chili con carne is literally chili with meat. So anything with carne means meat. So any animal that lives on just meat is called a carnivore. Any animal that lives just on plants is a herbivore. So that leaves one last type of animal. Can you guess what this might eat? You might even know the name of it. So these, of course, are omnivores. One more time, repeat after me. Omnivore. Omnivore. Great stuff. Now, an omnivore is an animal that can eat both plants and meat. So humans are a great example of that. We eat both plants and meat, so we are omnivores. Now, the way I remember these three, I remember herbivore, because thinking of herbs and spices, things like parsley or basil, herb is all green things. Carnivores, as I said, chili con carne, I think of meat. And then omnivores, how do we remember something? What's a good way of remembering omnivores? Maybe pause the video and think of a nice way of remembering omnivores. Perhaps, the way I remember it is that omnivores eat anything, meat and vegetables, so they literally nom 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 nom. It doesn't matter what it is, they will it, they will nom it, they will eat anything. Not the most scientific way of remembering it, but I find it always helps. So one last look at that, and now I'm going to hide the descriptions. Now, can you remember, so feel free to call out at the computer, what do you call an animal that only eats meat? 3, 2, 1... Carnivores, of course it is. What do you call an animal that only eats plants? Hold it in your head. 3, 2, 1. Of course it is herbivores. And what do you call an animal that eats both meat and plants and vegetation? 3, 2, 1. Omnivores. Absolutely right. Remember, they nom 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 everything that they can. Very good. So, depending on their diet, different animals need different teeth. So all humans are born and end up growing the same types of teeth. However, with animals, it's very different. For instance, as you can see, this lion has a very different set of teeth to a donkey, which has a very different set of teeth to a bear. All animals have different sets of teeth because they have different jobs that they need to perform with it. So let's have a look at carnivores first. So carnivores, as you might have been able to guess, use canine teeth. They have lots of canines, which remember are used for tearing and ripping into food. Now, why do you think they might need so many canines? So the reason for it is because their diet is all meat. So they need it to tear apart tough meat. So canines are the best teeth to do that. So they have many pairs of long, sharp canines to grip into moving prey. So if you imagine a lion is chasing down a gazelle that's moving at a lot of pace, then a canine is going to stick into it and really, really give them a lot of grip. So they use them as well for tearing it apart, the meat apart as well. So carnivores have canines, but then they also have molars as well. Their molars are a little bit different to ours. They're slightly sharper, and they have those ridges, if you remember. They have molars, which are used to help rip and grind flesh into smaller chunks so that they can swallow it. So they have canines to tear into the flesh and to stick into moving prey, and then also they have those molars as well to help them grind the flesh into smaller chunks. So what I'm going to ask you to do, I'm just going to, just going to stop sharing my screen if I can. There we go. Sorry about that. So I'm going to move over now to my visualizer. There we go. Hopefully we should be able to see that absolutely fine. Now, if you don't have the sheet, no problem at all. I'm just going to be using it to describe what the task is. So next to the appropriate pictures, write a short description describing the diet of each animal type. You must include the group's name, what the group of animals eats, what teeth they have, and why they have those teeth. Now, don't worry if you don't have the sheet, because I'm actually going to complete it on a spare bit of paper, but I'm going to keep the sheet here so I've got the checklist next to me in case I need to make sure I've got it. Now, if you've printed out the sheet, you can write it next to each relevant picture. If you don't have the sheet, you can quite simply draw a picture over here. So this one is an animal that only eats meat. So I can just draw a really, really simple drawing. It can be a picture of a steak like this one, or I'm just going to draw a really sort of basic chicken drumstick. It doesn't need to be the best thing in the world, like that. Terrible picture, it doesn't matter. Now we need to write a short description describing the diet of each animal type. So let's start with the group's name. Now I've got a picture of meat here, so what do we call that again? An animal that just eats meat? 3, 2, 1. So good, it should be carnivores. So I've already included the group's name, fantastic. So carnivores, what that group of animals eats. So carnivores are animals that only eat meat. Fantastic. So now I can go back to this checklist and I can tick what that group of animals eats, because I've said they only eat meat. Now, what teeth they have. So I remember carnivores have 2 different types of teeth. They have canines. Not only do I need to say what teeth they have, I need to say why they have those teeth. So why do they have canines again? So they have canines for tearing into flesh and what's the second reason? So for tearing into flesh, why else do they use canines? Of course. So tearing into flesh and getting grip, getting a good grip in moving prey. There we go. Now, are canines the only type of teeth that carnivores have? No, not quite. So I can't tick these off yet because there are still some other teeth that I haven't mentioned. What's the other type of teeth that carnivores have? Yes, of course, it's molars. So I'm going to say carnivores also have molars. And what do they use molars for again? Which are used to grind their food into smaller chunks. So, I think I can now tick what teeth they have and why they have those teeth. Let's go through and read this one more time. Carnivores are animals that only eat meat. They have canines for tearing into flesh and getting a good grip in moving prey. Carnivores also have molars which are used to grind their food into smaller chunks. So I've written my paragraph here. If you've got the sheet, can you complete just the section on carnivores, please? Don't go on to this section yet. Just the carnivores, please. And if you're like me, you don't have the sheet printed, just on a bit of paper next to a picture of some meat. I'm sure yours will be a lot better than mine. Will be absolutely fine. So I'm going to leave mine on here for the first example, and the checklist is here to make sure that you've used everything. So have you used the group's name, what that group of animal eats, what teeth they have, and why they have those teeth. So I'll leave my paragraph up here just to help you out, just doing the carnivores bit. Okay, please pause your video now. Excellent. So hopefully you've now written a paragraph on carnivores. Let's move on with the presentation. So I'm just going to share my screen again. So the next one is herbivores. So herbivores have a very different set of teeth to carnivores because they eat different things. Remember, carnivores just eat meat, herbivores just eat plants. So herbivores need incisors to clip, cut, and tear off vegetation such as plants, shoots, and leaves. So if you look at the deer here, that is a herbivore, you can see that it's using its front incisors to cut off vegetation. So literally like a pair of scissors, remember, incisor, incissor, to cut off those leaves. So that's one that it uses. They also use molars, and they have several pairs of molars. They have far more than humans do, because if you think about it, well, I'll ask this question in a moment. Why do you think an animal like a deer, a herbivore, would need more molars than a carnivore? Have a little think, maybe talk to the person next to you or to your partner. Have a think. So the reason that they're going to have more molars is because the food that they're eating is a lot tougher. So they need to grind down food a lot more than a carnivore would have to, because things like leaves are really tough to break down in your mouth. So, so that's the reason why. So they also have jaws that can move from side to side to help with the chewing process. So they really can their jaws are also designed for grinding those. So herbivores have incisors to cut off those leaves, and they also have molars to grind the leaves as well into smaller bits that are easier to digest. Right, so have a final look at this, and I'm sure you can guess what I'm going to ask you to do now. Right, excellent. So hopefully you can now see the sheet again. What I'd like you to do is just write the same style of paragraph, but about this group here that you just looked at, that eat only plants. What's that called again? Of course, it is herbivores. So if you can please write your paragraph about herbivores just underneath your carnivore paragraph, that would be great. So what's the group's name? What do they eat? And what teeth they have and why they have those teeth. So I'll leave that on there to help. You can use your carnivore one as a kind of rough model of how you're supposed to do it. Okay? And if you need to go back to the herbivores slide, no problem at all. You can do that in your own time. Okay, pause the video and resume when you're ready to go. Okay, so hopefully you've finished writing your paragraph on herbivores, I should say. So, I'm going to share my screen again. And before we move on to the next group of animals, can you firstly remember what it's called? So we've done carnivores that just eat meat. We've done herbivores that just eat plants. Now, what do you call something that eats both plants and meat? Okay, call out in 3, 2, 1. Omnivores. Omnivores, of course. And before I move over the slide, what sort of teeth do you think omnivores are going to have? So pause the video, talk to the person maybe if you've got someone in your room, or just think to yourself, what sort of teeth do you think omnivores are going to have? Well, let's have a look. Considering humans are omnivores, they're going to have similar ones to us. So here we have a lovely picture of two bears enjoying a pumpkin. They also love eating fish and other meat as well. So omnivores. They have incisors to help cut chunks off food, just like us. So the bears you can see here are using their front incisors to cut off bits of pumpkin. They have canines which help grip and tear flesh, and they have molars that are used to grind plants. Plant matter and flesh into smaller pieces. Now, the reason that omnivores is quite straightforward is because what we've looked at for the last 2 weeks, the human mouth, that is an example of an omnivore. Humans are omnivores. So in fact, we actually know what teeth we have, and we've already been through that a bit. So omnivores have incisors to cut chunks of food, canines, remember, they tear into flesh, and then molars help grind and break down bits of plants and meat as well. So that one's quite nice and straightforward for us because we just need to think of the human mouth. So once again, hopefully you can see my screen there. What I'd like you to do, if you've got the sheet, you're going to complete the omnivores section on the back. If, like me, just do it underneath your herbivore section. So you should then, by the time we finish this section, have a carnivores paragraph, a herbivores paragraph, and then finally an omnivores paragraph. And remember these 4 bullet points. Use it as a checklist. The group's name, what that group of animal eats, what teeth they have, and why they have those teeth. So again, pause the video. If you need to go back to see, check out omnivores' teeth, then you can do. Okay, off you go. Okay, folks, hopefully that means you are all done with that final section of the omnivores paragraph. So let's have a little look at the next section here. So as an extension, although I think many of you will be able to do this, it's quite a fun activity, I'd like you to look at the 6 different animal skulls and their teeth. Now, can you work out which animals are herbivores, which are carnivores, or omnivores, based on the types of teeth they have? So we've looked at the shapes of different teeth before, so you should maybe be able to tell which ones are canines, which are incisors, and so on and so forth. And also you've got the name of each animal underneath you, which should give you a hint as well. So how I'd like you to sort this, again I'm going to just share my screen, sorry there's a lot of going backwards and forwards. Right, so if you've got this sheet, then you've got carnivores, herbivores, omnivores there. However, if you're like me, I've just drawn 3 very rough circles. They don't need to be the neatest in the world, that again have carnivores, omnivores, or herbivores. You really don't need the sheet to complete this activity at all. What I'd like you to do is then look at the 6 animals, which I'm going to put back on the screen in a moment, and put them in the correct place that you think they belong. So if we were to look at the skull number 1, which is a bear, you examine the teeth and you think, oh, I think the bear is going to be omnivore. You would put bear in this section there. And then if you can complete that with all 6 of them. So I will share my screen for you. So I'd advise actually if you want to pause this video if you don't have the circles already drawn. So pause the video now and draw the circles with carnivore, omnivore, and herbivore there. Excellent. Now that you've drawn the circles, let me share my screen again. And here are those 6 animals. So with the first one, I can see that we've got some canines, these really long, pointy teeth over here on the bear. I can see that we've got some molars at the back here. So this one's a tricky one. So it could well be a carnivore, because carnivores have both, or it could be an omnivore. Now I'm going to go with omnivore because it's got only a couple of canine teeth right at the front, but it's got mostly molars. It's got quite a lot of set of molars. So I'm going to say that it's an omnivore, and I'm going to put there in my omnivore section. However, it may change. So have a look at these 6 skulls. Can you sort them into those 3 categories? Okay, pause the video now. Best of luck, guys. Off you go. Right, so hopefully you've had a chance to sort those 6 skulls into their categories. Let's see how you got on. So if you had got it right, these are how they were sorted. So house cat and dog would come under carnivores. Omnivores, beaver and deer. And herbivores, oh, I'm sorry, that should definitely not be there. Bear is not a herbivore. That should be moved over here. I put bear and beaver in the wrong place, my apologies. So let me go through that again. Carnivores, house cat and dog. Omnivores, bear and deer. And then herbivore, beaver and pig. So tick those and mark those as we go along. If you've got some of them incorrect, don't worry about it, because it's really hard to tell with just the skulls and the teeth. Now, what I would like you to do, have a look at this skull here. As a challenge, can you tell me what group does it belong to? And do you think you can tell me what animal it is? Which would be really impressive just from what the skull looks like. So what group does this belong to? Is it a carnivore, a herbivore, or an omnivore? And also, for an extra point, can you guess what animal it is? Off you go. So hopefully you've had a bit of a chance to think. Now, looking at the teeth, we have some really long, spiky canines, really pointy canines over here, which tells us that it's certainly not going to be a herbivore. And then looking at the teeth at the back, we have these really, really ridged canine teeth over here. So we've got a set of really pointy canines, then some slightly smaller canines over here, and then right at the back we have these ridged molars. So what animal does that tell you that's going to be? Mostly canines with some molars at the back. Hopefully that'll tell you that it's a carnivore. Now, judging from the shape of its skull and what its teeth look like, do you think you know what animal it is? If you guess something like dog, you're very close, or fox. The correct answer is actually wolf. So this is a wolf skull. Really, really well done if you managed to get that right. But it's definitely a carnivore, is the main thing that you needed to get from there. Really well done, guys. You've done a fantastic job today. If you'd like, we've got a quick recap quiz, just 4 questions on today's lesson. So if you'd like to write them on a spare bit of paper, and we'll go through these really quickly. So, number 1, which type of teeth do carnivores mostly have? Don't worry about writing this down, just call the answer out at the screen. Which type of teeth do carnivores mostly have? Do they mostly have incisors, canines, premolars, or molars? Of course, the answer there is canine. What type of teeth do herbivores use to cut chunks of vegetation? Are they incisors, canines, premolars, or molars? What type of teeth do herbivores use to cut chunks off vegetation? Of course, it is incisors, because we know that they use those to cut. That's the key word there. Why do omnivores need all 4 different types of teeth? Because they just eat plants, because they just eat meat, because they eat both plants and meat, or because they don't eat any meat or plants. Of course, it's because they eat both plants and meat. So they need those canines for tearing, they need those incisors for cutting, and the molars and premolars to grind. Excellent. And finally, why do carnivores need sharp teeth? Is it to grind up plants, to catch and grab onto their prey, to scrape off bark from the trees, or to pick up their cubs? What's the answer for that one? Of course, it's to catch and grab onto their prey. Really, really well done, guys. Excellent work. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen there. I'm going to change this camera back so it's facing me. Excellent, guys. Fantastic work, I've got to say. Today, we've learned loads about human teeth in the first 2 weeks, and now loads about animal teeth in those 3 main categories, which we will be recapping and quizzing ourselves on next week. Have a wonderful weekend, and I will see you in reading on Monday. Goodbye.